Hello, friends. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I am coming to you live today from the beautiful state of Connecticut, where I have the honor of pet sitting a couple of apricot labradoodles. So I am not in my normal studio, but I brought all my equipment with me. So I hope that all of it is working well and that you will be able to enjoy this fun live stream today. So thank you so much for joining me. And we have some fun things in store today. The agenda includes all about arrows, as the one and only Mike Rankin, the editor-in-chief of CreativePro magazine, wrote that we're going to get right to the point today. So if you've ever tried working with arrows, whether that's in Photoshop, InDesign, or Illustrator, they have a lot of possibilities, but they're all also a little bit different in all of those different apps. So we're going to be taking a look at how strokes and arrows work in all of those different apps. And then at the end, I'm going to share a really cool, I think it's really cool, member download that I created to go along with this topic, which is a bunch of different doodly arrows that you can use in your projects. So it's a bit of a swipe file, if you will. And if we have time, I can show you also just how I made it. But that is actually going to be available here for members. So the link is down below in the description for this video, and that will take you to this page right here where you can see, here's the video. Now, if you are a member and you're logged in, then you will see this link right here where you can actually demo or download. It says demo file, but it's the goodie file, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Okay, let's see where we've got some people tuning in from a few different places today. Susan, hello, Susan is joining us from the UK. Love that. I hope you guys are having cooler weather than much of the United States is experiencing right now. And we have Splividend. I'm not saying this right, but hello from Illinois. Welcome. MacNut loves my earrings. Thank you. I made these. Isn't that fun? That's truly geeking out. And we have someone watching from Morocco. One of my favorite trips ever was a trip to Morocco. And of course, the one and only David Blattner is here. Labradoodle. He said he thought member goodie was member doodle. Yes, that rhymes with labradoodle. Oh, did I say it right? Good. Okay. Very cool, you guys. And well, of course, and we can't leave out the one and only Erica Gamet, which is joining us from Seattle, and she is looking forward to getting pointy today or something. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. And I look forward to checking in on the chat every now and then and seeing what questions I might be able to answer for you. That said, I think we can just jump right into it. And I thought we would start with Photoshop. So Photoshop has probably one of the more limited options for working with arrows. So I thought we would start there. But it does have some options that most people actually probably don't know about. And it has some other options that are actually completely hidden these days unless you know where to look. So let's actually start with that before we get into talking about strokes and adding arrowheads. I want to show you how easy it is to work with actual arrow shapes that are already built into Photoshop. But if you don't know where to look, you're not going to find them anywhere. So here's how we do that. We are going to find them in the Shapes panel. So we want to come up to the Window menu and click to open our Shapes panel. Now you may look at this and be like, I don't see arrows, and you would be right. We've got animals, leafy trees, boats, and flowers, which is kind of a weird, random, limited set of options. But here's where you have to dig. You have to go to your shape panel menu right up here in the corner. And then you're going to come down where it says legacy shapes and more. And when you click on that, you get this folder that was just previously hidden. I'm not sure why it's not just here all the time, but it's not. And if we twirl this open, we've got two more hidden folders. We have 2019 shapes, and then we have all the legacy default shapes. And if we open the all legacy default shapes folder, then we can see there is a whole folder dedicated to arrows. So if we twirl this open and look inside, look at all of these fun arrows. So there's a lot of cool things in here that you can play with. So let's say we'll just drag one of them here. I'm just gonna start with this guy and click and drag it out onto my document. And when I let go, it's gonna take on whatever characteristics I guess I used last. So in this case, I've got a shape with no fill and a black stroke. So you can see that once I drop that onto the canvas, it opens up the properties panel. And this is a handy place where we can make changes. So in this case, I might want the fill to actually be black. Oh, I have to commit that first. Sorry, you can see, let's do this again. Once you drag that in, it's got the transform box around it, so you can't actually do anything else until you commit that transformation. So I'm just going to press return to do that. And now if we look in our properties panel, if we decide we want this to have a fill, we can click right here and give it, say, a black fill. If we want to add another stroke on top of that, we could. I'm going to turn it off for now. But that's kind of all there is to it when you're working with these shapes. So again, that is in the shapes panel. But again, you're not going to see these shapes as an option unless you go to the little panel menu. I like to call it a burger menu, and not necessarily hamburger. It could be a veggie burger. So you want to go to the burger menu and open legacy shapes and more. And then you can just drag and drop these, and they're vector shapes. So once you get them out here, you can press Command or Control T and scale them around, and you don't have to worry about losing quality. You can, of course, also flip them. So if I wanted to flip this maybe this way and rotate it, something like this, maybe I even want to have it be the same size as this box I already have here. So something like that. So you have a lot of cool options, and you can see there's a lot of fun swirly arrows and things in here. Okay, so that is a look at working in Photoshop with shapes. I'm going to go ahead and close that panel for now and maybe just hide that shape. Another way in Photoshop to work with arrows is to just draw them yourself using the line tool. So what you want to do is grab the shape tools. So the keyboard shortcut for shape tools is the letter U for unique shapes. And the easiest way to work is to use the line tool right here. And when you're using any of these shape tools, you can work in 3 different ways. So up here at the top, you can use that shape tool to make a shape. So that would have the ability to have a stroke and a fill. Or you could just draw a path, but then you can't just have a fill and a stroke, but it's good for other things. Or you could just make pixels, but then it's not going to be vector. So for most instances, when you're drawing arrows, you're probably going to want that vector advantage. So you're going to want to choose shape. And because we're drawing with just a line in this case, the line, because it's an open shape, it's not a closed shape like the arrow we just saw. In this case, it's going to get its color not from a fill, so I'm going to set that to none, but it's going to pull its color from the stroke. So we'll go ahead and choose that. And I don't know what this is going to look like, but let's just draw it out and see, and we can edit it from there. So with my line tool selected, I've got shape set, no fill, black stroke. Here we go. I'm just going to click and drag. And if we zoom in and I switch to the move tool, we can see we have a very thin line here. And if you were making like a map, this is sort of a very stylized map, let's pretend, this would be a really tiny line and hard to see. And it definitely isn't an arrow. So we need to beef that up a little bit. So I'm going to press the U key to make sure I still have my line tool. And this is a live shape. So with the line tool active and being on that layer that was created when we drew that shape, we can actually come up to our control panel and thicken it up right here if we want. And maybe not. Let's just draw it again. And we'll thicken it up maybe ahead of time. There we go. All right. So here is our line. And we can add arrowheads in a couple of different places. We can come up here in the control panel and click on the little gear icon right here, which you might not have ever noticed this before. We can add a arrowhead to the start or the end. But these generally, as I'm now remembering, I think that these settings have to be done before you draw the line. But if we look in the properties panel, there we go. The properties panel, that's a weird quirk, right? The properties panel is going to let us edit the shape live, whereas up here, you have to choose your settings beforehand. So there's a lot of different idiosyncrasies about how all these things work. But now that we've got our line, we can come over to our properties panel. And here we can adjust a number of things, including we can turn on the arrowhead. So we can decide if we want the arrowhead to be at the start or the end of the line. So I'm going to go ahead and click start. And if I zoom in on this, you can see it's kind of a goofy looking arrow. But that's because it gives us all kinds of options for how we want to customize it. So for example, if we want a wider arrow, we can come down here to the width and we can either type in a number, or I'm going to just scrub on the word width. And I wish all the Adobe apps would let us scrub, but they don't. And that's like a unique thing to Photoshop, which is pretty awesome. So this is going to determine how wide our arrow is. And then down here, we can adjust the length. So I want to make my arrow quite a bit longer, something like that. And then there's a setting down here for concavity. Concavity? Not sure how you say that. But it adjusts how concave, I guess you would say, these points right here are. So if we wanted it to be flatter, we could drag that to a lower value, or even it can go into the negatives, and then it looks like a spearhead. But that is all there is to it in Photoshop. So you are a little bit more limited in Photoshop. You don't get a variety of different arrowheads. You get one, but you can customize it in the properties panel. Up here in the control panel, you have to basically know what you're doing straight out of the gate, which I don't know about you. That's not how I work. So then you want to be in the properties panel to adjust this stuff. You can also add arrows on the end. So here we have a double-headed arrow if you want. And let's see what else. If you wanted to, whoops, not do that. But you can also change your stroke. And now I've got this so huge that we're getting crazy things. There we go. So you can adjust your lines as well to be dashed or dotted and all of that. And we'll take a closer look at this in Illustrator. But the same settings are available here in Photoshop. So let's see, what questions do you guys have at this point? Hello from Munich, Alexander. Yay. And I see that we have a question about finding InDesign scripts for use. And I know that on CreativePro's website, there are a ton of scripts and links for all kinds of resources. So I would definitely suggest checking that out. Okay, so that's kind of it for Photoshop. Again, just to review, we used shapes from the shape panel. So window, shapes, and then you've got to come in here and enable this legacy shapes folder in order to find the arrows. And they are located in the legacy shapes and more, and then in another subfolder called all legacy default shapes. Although it's apparently not including the 2019 shapes because they have their own folder. So arrows folder in there, and you can drag those out and tweak all of your settings. The arrowhead option themselves can be found ahead of time if you come up here and enable it from the cogwheel, or after the fact, you can come here from the properties panel and put it in here. Your properties panel should likely pop open automatically, but if it doesn't, you can always find it from the window menu by choosing window and properties. All right, let's take a peek at InDesign next. So here we have a whole lot of other options. So let's start with our good old-fashioned line tool. So same as in Photoshop. And we're just going to click and drag to draw out a line. Up in the control panel, of course, we can thicken up the weight of that stroke, maybe something like this. And if we pop open our strokes panel, so I've got mine here on the side, but if you don't see it, you can find it from the window menu under stroke. And here you're going to see it's a lot of the same types of options, but much finer control. So for one thing, down here under start and end, we have a whole lot of options, and it goes beyond just arrows. We also have little circles and squares, so you can do a number of things here. So let's say this one looks pretty good. So now I can add that in, and here's a really cool thing that people don't always realize. I'm going to turn this. Actually, if you decide, like I just did, that I actually want the arrow on the other side, you could rotate it, but you could also click this little button right here in the middle, and that's just going to flip-flop your endpoints. All right, but what if you want your line to be this thick, but then you want the arrowhead to actually be thicker? You can do that down here just below the arrowhead. There's this little number. And right now, this is the default of 100%, but I can actually click and make this bigger. And if I hold down the shift key, it'll grow bigger faster. And of course, I can type in a number here as well. So that's going to give us a much larger arrowhead if that's what we want. And it also gives us the option, of course, like all strokes, we could change the cap. We want to have a rounded cap. If we had corners, we could round those as well. But we can also align the stroke inside or outside of our line. And this option right here is pretty cool. This tells InDesign if you want the tip of the arrow to be at the actual end of the line, or if you want it to actually go beyond. So maybe here, I'll show you the difference. Here, if I turn on this option, then the arrow gets added to the end of the path, which means it actually extends beyond the path. And this option means that the arrow fits within the path so that the tip of it is right at the end of the path. So there's a lot of different options here. If you want to have a dashed line, for example, You can come here in the stroke panel and change from like a solid line to any number of things. There's dashes. You could do triple lines. You can really get funky with some of this. There are a couple of different dashed presets. So we have dashed here where it says 3 and 2 and dashed 4 and 4. And what those numbers are referring to is the length of the dash and the length of the gap. So those are two little presets, but you can also make your own if you come down here to dashed. And we can see we don't have a big gap right now because I was playing around in here and I made a bit of a mess. So let's have a 6-point dash. Oops. There we go. And oops, we can also, we'll change some of these settings in a minute. Let's see, we'll dial the weight down and there we go. So it takes some experimentation, but you can adjust the size of the gap as well as the size of the dash itself. So maybe I want to make this a little bigger. And if you want a hard edge dash, let me zoom in so it looks like this, then you can set your cap to be either a butt cap or a projecting cap. But if you want it to be rounded, you can choose a round cap. And if you make your dash size small enough, then you can get dots. And the gap in between them will determine how spread out the dots are, which I just think is so fun. You can even do goofy stuff like put in a color for the gap. So maybe we want like this wild red color to be in the gap. I'm not sure that that's super usable, but it's there. I'm sure someone would have a creative idea about how to do that. Another thing that's worth knowing, I guess it doesn't necessarily apply to most arrows, but if you wanted to draw, let's say, a line, maybe your arrow is going to be kind of funky and point like this. And I'll just sample these settings and dial it down a little bit. Whoop. And let's make this gap much smaller. There we go. So if we had something like this, you can also have it adjust how it goes around the corners down here. You can have it adjust the dashes for the corners or just the gaps or dashes and gaps. So whatever is going to give you a better looking edge if you need it. And this one's tricky because I made it round. Let's try something like this. There you go. Now you can see it a little bit better. But you can adjust the way that those things get applied around the corners that can really give you a better effect. So that is a look at InDesign. I want to show you one more trick that I just actually learned when I was putting together this live stream. And I've linked the CreativePro article down below, but there was a really cool article linked down below, and it was talking about some cool things that you can do to sort of have better arrows in InDesign. So I wanted to show you that really quick, and I kind of pre-cooked it just for simplicity's sake. But let's say that you want to create like a double-headed arrow like this that can be adjusted to any size. Like maybe you're doing something with, I don't know, measurements. There we go. And you want to be able to shorten or lengthen this, but you need some kind of different arrowhead that InDesign doesn't offer. Check out this neat trick. So it starts with just a wingding character. So with my glyphs panel, I found this little wingding. So this is actually text in here, right? And what I did was converted this to an outline. So it's no longer text, it's actually an outline. So let me do it. I'll show you along right here. So here I've just made a copy and I'm going to convert it to outline by choosing Type, Create Outlines. And then I wanted to chop off the little tail here. So I used the marquee or rectangle frame tool to draw a frame. And I'm going to select both the arrow and the frame. And if I go to the Pathfinder panel, which is under Window, Object and Layout Pathfinder, so here we're getting kind of Illustrator type controls, and we can actually minus front so that we chopped off that little tail, right? And then I'm going to draw a text frame, and I'm going to duplicate this. So we have two versions of it, a left and a right, and I'm going to copy this. And using my type tool, I'm going to put my cursor in here and paste it. I think I need a bigger frame. There we go. Same with this. I'm going to copy it and use my type tool to insert my cursor and paste it in there. And that looks fun, actually, just as it is. But here's the thing. Now, if I put my cursor in between them and we insert a right, is it a right justified tab? We'll go under Type, Insert Special Character, Other, right indent tab. We're going to put that in there. And then we have this text frame. And on one end, it has a outlined vector little shape. This is an inline graphic, essentially. And on the other side, we have the same thing, but flipped. And we're going to make sure we adjust the frame size to match the little inset graphics just right. So I'm going to bring up my frame options, my text frame options by pressing Command or Control B. You can also right click and choose text frame options. And in here, we're going to say auto size, and we're going to adjust it so that the height is always exactly matching. Because now, if we add paragraph rules to this, above and below, and we fiddle with it for more than you want to watch me do live on camera, you can get this. So I'll set it up here, but I'm not going to finesse it the same way because we'll be here forever. It's tedious, but it's doable. So what I did was, once I get this built, I'm going to select my type tool, and I'm going to come way over here to this panel menu with the type tool active, and I'm going to enable paragraph rules. And of course, a paragraph rule is just a line, and you can have it be above or below a paragraph or both. So in this case, I enabled a rule above, so I'm going to turn that on. And you have to adjust the weight. So you want to get the thickness to match in this case. And then I offset it. So this is going to be the rule above. So I'm offsetting it. You can see where it gets a little tedious, but I had to finagle it. I don't know, it's like 32.5 pixels or whatever. And then we can indent it so that it doesn't stick out like that. And left indent. You can see where this is going, right? So there's one line, pretend it matches. Then we'll get to the rule below, turn it on, and you do the same thing. And when you're done, you have this, which is vector, and all you have to do to adjust it is shrink the line or extend the line, and you have this super easy graphic that you can make with any graphic shape or wingding or other glyph, which is pretty amazing. So I just thought that was super cool. And shout out to, is it Lindsay Bergen? I forget her last name, but it's linked below. And I thought that was a super tip, and so I wanted to just call attention to that. Let's see what's going on in the chat. You guys have questions about that? Has anybody done that before? Yeah. We have people tuning in from India. Awesome. Yes, and Erica, I figured you would like the paragraph rules thing. That's cool, right? I wish I could say I came up with it, not my trick. But it's one of the many resource articles that are available to members on CreativePro's website. So I'm always finding neat things on there. Susan says, super cool trick, right? That is amazing. So if you know Linda, that's her trick, and you can let her know. Okay, very cool. Let's see. Let's move on. We'll go back to our desktop here. And now let's take a look in Illustrator, where we have the most options of all options, right? Like Illustrator is the place to have control over all of your arrows. So what do I have here? What do I have here? There we go. We have a quick little arrow that I made. So just like in InDesign, I've used the line tool here to just click and drag out a line. And in Illustrator's stroke panel, we can come down here to the arrowheads. Now check this out. Look at all the cool arrowheads and tails that Illustrator gives you. And fun little things like scissors and little pointy kind of vintage hand signs. Those are super fun. So you can just pick one. We'll do this guy here. And again, you can flip flop them if you forget which way you drew the line, which is surprisingly I forget a lot. But you can flip flop it again with this little button here. And you can adjust the scale of the arrowhead, which is tied to the weight. So if I boost the weight of my line, you can see the arrowhead gets a little bit bonkers. So it's really nice to be able to control the line weight and the arrowhead size separately. So I would probably want to scale this down. There we go. And then down here, we have that same thing that we saw in InDesign, where that arrowhead can either be applied within the stroke or the path, or it can be added on to the end of the path. And of course, we also have different profiles and things you can add to the path to just change the shape of it and how it looks. And you don't have to be limited to drawing shapes with, the line tool, obviously. In any of these apps, you can use the pen tool, you can use you could do straight edges, you can use the curvature tool. There's all kinds of options. And so I'm going to delete these and I'm going to show you some fun things that I created as a fun bonus download for members. And I'll show you how I did some of them. So I made all of these in Illustrator, but don't panic if you're not an Illustrator user or you just don't want to have to get into Illustrator. I can show you how to access this in Photoshop as well, or in InDesign too. But let me show you first, I guess, how I created these things, and then we can talk about that. Some of these were just shapes, like these little arrows. They were just carrots that I made into an arrow. But other ones like this or some of these, I just drew using the pencil tool. So in Illustrator, the keyboard shortcut for the pencil is N. And if you double click on it, you can adjust the options for that tool. So I'm doing all of this on my trackpad on my laptop. So I'm out on the road. Somehow I didn't pack my Wacom tablet. I didn't even bring a magic mouse or anything. I like to travel light. So I'm drawing this on my trackpad. So it's really helpful to crank up the smooth level. And then I just came in here and just did some little doodles. And you can see, look how helpful it is to have that smoothed out. So I'm going to add a little stroke to it. If I want to edit it, like not so happy about how this is looking, you can actually go in and edit the points, but also if you redraw it, let's just delete that one. But if you kind of go over it again, it will adjust your pencil line. So if you just kind of want to try again, you can redraw it. The trick is you want to start not where you see that little star. So if I get on here, I can come in and just like redraw these lines. a little bit finicky. But that's the idea. And then, of course, we can add the arrowhead. So whichever one of these, maybe we'll go with like one of these guys. So that's how easy it is to do an arrow like that. This one is also really easy. Let's say we just draw with our pencil tool again. I'm just going to draw a little curve like this, and we'll throw an arrowhead on it. And we can increase the size of the arrowhead and maybe the weight a little bit. And then, I don't know if you're familiar with the width tool. Is that what it's called? Yeah, the width tool. So here in Illustrator, the width tool, the keyboard shortcut is Shift W. But if you grab this tool, it's an easy way to just click and maybe expand the width of the stroke without having to expand the stroke into a filled shape, which then, you know, you can still edit, but it's not just a simple open path anymore. So look how cool that is. And it's really easy to do. It takes just a couple of seconds. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. I'm glad. Yay. Yeah, the paragraph thing is really cool. Paragraph rules. Please give tips on the pen tool. Well, the easiest way to use the pen tool is to use it. If you're not comfortable drawing the curves, what I would suggest is to just draw just straight edges. And then if you press the escape key to end the pen tool, and then you switch to the anchor point tool, the keyboard shortcut is Shift C. Check this out. So even if I draw like a really ugly zigzag line, if I switch to the anchor point tool after I draw the zigzag, then I can come in here and I can suddenly pull and create a fun and different shape. And I didn't have to obsess about all those curves as I was drawing them. And you can click and pull and convert the point here from a cusp point into a smooth point. So I think that's a much easier way to work with the pen tool if you're not already very comfortable with it. Oh, and I just realized I didn't switch back to my desktop to show you that. Let's do it again. So I would say take the pen tool, here's your zigzag shape, right? You draw your shape and then you want to disconnect it by pressing escape and then switch to that anchor point tool. You can find it buried with the pen tool or by pressing Shift C. And then you can come in here and drag to get whatever kind of fun shape. Now these kind of look like ocean waves. So you can take those straight line segments and then pull them and they become curves. And if you want to convert the point itself, then you can click on the point and then it becomes a smooth point. So it's a really easy way to edit your shapes, your lines, without having to just draw it that way. And I find that really, really helpful. So what else is in here that I can kind of show you? This guy I created by just using a single line. So here we'll kind of recreate it quick. So just a single stroke, single line with a black stroke and kind of fatten it up a bit. And then for the arrowheads, I scrolled down to the hand here. And if we elongate this and we beef up the stroke but shrink down the hand, you can get all kinds of different effects. And what's also really cool is if we get our width tool, we can come in here and we can widen the width. So if we're trying to match it to the cuff, for example, we could make it wider down here or narrower or something like that, which is pretty fun. The width tool, yes, Erica loves the width tool. I do too. I only discovered it, I don't know, within the past few years, and it's such a game changer because otherwise, previously, you would have had to expand the path this into a closed shape, and then you lose some of your editing options. So I really love that as well. What else is in here worth showing you? I think that was kind of it. So here is the file that is included on the website for members, and I've already expanded everything in here, so it's really easy to work with. You can open it up in Illustrator and just copy and paste, or for those of you that maybe aren't into Illustrator or just don't want to work with it for whatever reason, another thing you can do, and people don't always know this, but if you go into, I'm in Bridge here, but however you want to get to your files, I'm going to right click and I can choose to open an Illustrator file in Photoshop. And when I do that, it's going to basically ask me what size do I want it to be, because it's going to rasterize it, right? It's going to turn this vector file into pixels. So you have to think about what size you want to use those little arrows at so that you can size the whole artboard up big enough so that the individual arrows are the size that you need. So I don't know, for just as an example, I'm just gonna do whatever it says here, but you could increase the resolution and size if you need to. I'm gonna click OK, and then it's gonna open the whole thing here in Photoshop. So we've lost the vectorness of it, but now you can come in here and like, let's say we want this arrow here. So I'm going to use any of the selection tools to put marching ants around it, and I'll switch to my move tool, and now I can just drag it and throw it in here. And now, how fun is that? Now I have a little arrow in Photoshop. And if you're uncomfortable working with Illustrator, this is one way to avoid it. Of course, if you want to be in InDesign, then it's really easy to take any of these arrows and select this one, and I'm just going to copy it, and then we can go over to InDesign, and if I paste it, because I pasted this in from Illustrator, I can also change the colors of it right here. Oh, that's a terrible. You can't see that at all, can you? Let's make it pink. That'll show up, right? So now it's still vector, and I can edit the color just by copying and pasting it from the Illustrator file into InDesign. You can change the color too in Photoshop. It's just, this is not vector. So the easiest way to change the color, I would suggest, is to add a effect, a layer style, and I would add a color overlay. And then we would choose like normal for the blend mode. And then we can make this hot pink or red or whatever. So yes, MacNut says, love doing that in InDesign. I don't blame you. It's such a game changer. I mean, there's so many ways to get these kinds of elements into the different apps, right? Like you can, obviously, you can copy and paste things in, like in Photoshop. You can choose to do it as a smart object or a shape file or whatever, if you're coming from a vector program. But you can place things and you can drag things from the Creative Cloud libraries. There's so many different ways. But if it's not important to you that you maintain that link for editability and having an updated file all the time, then my favorite way is to just copy and paste like that, because it's just so easy to work with, and then it's right there, and you don't have to worry about links and all of those things. So let's see, what else? What other questions do you guys have? Do you use the arrows a lot? sometimes I find it pretty, it's kind of frustrating that it works so differently in all of those different apps, and they all have their idiosyncrasies, kind of like working with gradients. I just made a series of gradient videos that will be coming to CreativePro soon, and the way that the gradients work in all the apps is similar, but like different enough that it can be really frustrating. And it's kind of the same when it comes to working with strokes and applying these arrowheads or tails or what have you. So if you guys have any last minute questions, I'm happy to try and give them an answer in the chat. Otherwise, I was just going to remind everybody that we will be in Washington, D.C. next month for Creative Pro Week, where we are going to have all of our favorite, best instructors, people you know and love. We're going to be out there sharing all kinds of tips and having fun and just being in our element, being surrounded by people who speak our language. And if you want to check it out, you can visit the URL at creativeproweek.com and get your tickets to come out and join us. Erica says, if I need fancy arrows, I build in Illustrator and place and adjust in InDesign. Yeah, for sure. I think Illustrator definitely has the most flexible options. Illustrator is probably the best place to make arrows, followed by InDesign, I would say, and then Photoshop. Unless, of course, you have those shapes that from that swipe file, or just the ones in Photoshop are great. And Alexander says, thanks for the tip with the legacy shapes in Photoshop. You are so welcome. Isn't it funny how many things in Photoshop are, and really all of the Adobe apps, but I feel like especially Photoshop, they're so hidden. And they used to be there and be so easy to find, and then they kind of moved at some point. And now they're in this weird structure of all these different legacy folders, and it just cracks me up. So I'm always happy to let people know that those things are there and how to find them and make the most of them. So awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you found this helpful, and hopefully I'll get to see you in DC with us. You can join us in person or also online. And otherwise, I will see you at our next live stream. So thanks so much for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of the day and a fantastic summer. See you next time.